Hello everyone, Manithral here, and welcome to another Suggestion Saturday video. Now, today's is going to be going back to something I had actually discussed in a previous video a little bit, when I was talking about improvements to skilling. Sorry, let me hide that little guy. And this one, it's actually a big deal to me, and I know there's some people out there who would love it, and I know there's some people who would hate it. But what I want to discuss is passive effects for combat with skills. Now, I didn't get a lot of stuff, that's unfortunate. I didn't get a lot of stuff really worked out for it, but I did have some skills. I couldn't think of everything for, every single skill, and obviously, these are not set in stone, they are subject to change. Whether you guys think they should change, or whether I think they should change, or whether Jagged thinks they should change, etc., etc. But my thought is, okay, I think I'll start from the top and I'll work my way down here. But first one I have written down is rune crafting, and how it could affect, combat is by less rune consumption. Now, I know some people would say, well, there's EOC with your abilities, you don't use as many runes. While this is very true, there still is a rune consumption, whether it be grand or very little. There still is, the consumption, so it still exists. And this addition to it would not get rid of the consumption, but it would be more of an additional benefit. Now, I gotta turn that down a little bit. I can't hear myself talk or think. Okay, so also I have written down that it can increase magic damage, which would actually be, beneficial for some other people too for combat. The next skill I have written down is smithing. While you could actually have enhanced armor, so you would know better how to defend, so it would be boosting maybe defense, but also it would be basically damage reduction. So it'd be like an invisible boost to your defense. And maybe +1 for every 10 levels of smithing, you get a +1, so all the way up to 9 additional defense. Which isn't much, but in the grand scale of things with how RuneScape is, it actually is a decent amount. And on the vice versa, that also means since you are more and more proficient with armors, you know more and more weaknesses of the different types of armor, so you would actually have an increased damage dealt, whether it be through any form of combat. However, it would only apply to armored opponents. So stuff that's not armored, stuff like dragons, they're not really armored. That's dragon hide, and that's their natural skin. So you're not really going to be getting a damage reduction in that sense. Next one is actually fletching, which of course would be increased range damage because you would have more durable bows, more powerful releases, because like the bowstring would hold up better, be more tension on it. The arrows would also dwindle a little bit less, so it'd be like a natural way to keep you more and more arrows. Just like within rune crafting, there's a way to reduce the amount of runes you use. Here would be reducing your ammunition because, well, not so much reducing your ammunition, but reducing the chance of it disappearing, like breaking. And that would only apply for made type stuff. Which, keep in mind, there's soon going to be new ranged equipment coming, whether it's through bosses or whatever. But with this mining and smithing rework, it might not be immediate because I don't know if there's going to be trees up to the point of where they want to go. But there is Elder Logs yet, which cannot be made into a crossbow, I believe. So eventually there will probably be more trees to go all the way up to tier 90 for crossbows. Unless they just use a different tree or Elder and gets them all. Agility would be less damage taken, so it'd be kind of like a boost to your defense. Because you'd be able to move better, you could actually get out of the way easier, so you have an increased chance of taking 0 damage. Not a whole lot, but even a small percent would be, quite substantial. And then also, now for this one is where it gets a little bit tricky. It will have increased speed for attack speeds when it comes to legacy. It won't be by a lot, but it would be by a little bit. So you would be able to tell a difference between somebody who is 99 versus somebody who is level 1 ranged, agility. But also for people who are not using legacy, for the EOC users such as myself, there would be the reduced cooldowns on your abilities. And so for instance, like this here one, instead of 15%, let's say at 99 agility, it's dropped down to 13 or even 12 seconds. So that's where I fall on that one. Up next is going to be thieving, which I want to have ability, kind of like if any of you guys have played some of the Final Fantasies, I'm sure you guys have. There was, especially in 7, there's a materia called Mug. And what it did is it did a little bit of damage, but mostly it stole items. And that's actually what I want to try to bring into RuneScape. So it'd be kind of like an extra loot type steal. Now, since this is kind of a big move, it would be an ultimate ability. And it would have to be unlocked through some sort of fashion with thieving. This is an ability that wouldn't be just, hey, you have it. This would have to be an unlock. And then Shadow Strike. It's something that, like, you have this small percent chance to do an extra little bit of damage. It's kind of like a sneaky type attack. Cooking. More healing with food. Your food is better, it tastes better, and it maybe even have some increased stats. So those would be the 2 potential benefits for that. So maybe occasionally, you might get a boosted stat boost. Or occasionally you might get more health. Divination. Now this one, I'm not sure exactly how it should go. But you would have the capability of restoring prayer, health, energy, and summoning. Since it is essentially its energy, you'd be able to form it into the fashion that you need. So it would be something that could actually help potentially boost all of those attributes as you're skilling. Now these are the only skills I currently have written down as for stuff that, can go. Obviously there's many more skills. I have some other ones here, but I don't have much written down for them. Like for instance, herb lore, I have increased pot timers. Oh, sorry. So maybe at the end, like at level 99 herb lore, stuff like your overloads, stuff that generally lasts like 5 minutes would now last 6 minutes. So it would have a little bit of a benefit. And maybe a little bit of increased status additions for certain different types of potions. Not all potions, but certain ones. Okay, and I have Dungeoneering here. And I kind of want to go off of how Dungeoneering actually is. It's very unpredictable. It's procedurally generated. That's why it should have unpredictable effects. Not negative towards you, but negative towards your enemies. So this, it might do a little bit of extra damage at one point. You might do poison damage at one point. This one is one that I really don't know. It was kind of an unpredicted thing. That's why I call it an unpredicted effect. There'd have to be a set range of effects that you could do, it could produce. Now, I understand if you combine all these things together, it could be quite substantial and quite game-breaking. That's why I don't really know about Dungeoneering. Because to have it mixed in with the other ones, if you have all these damage increases, it could potentially break the game. That's why it has to be gradual, and they have to be small increases, if any at all. Maybe these skills can have different abilities that would temporarily increase stats or temporarily increase that, or have an increased damage type attack. For instance, like maybe rune crafting, you get to unlock different abilities. Now for legacy, there would be something to contribute towards them, which would be less rune consumption. So there would have to be a lot of balancing with this. Hunter, I can't really think of anything other than increased damage, but that, like, again, it'd be too much damage. Crafting, I think of finely tuned, a very fine type products. So that's why I would say increase precision. It would increase your attack rate by a little bit. So your attack percent would actually go up. So your minimum damage would go up. Not your maximum, but your minimum damage. And invention, I have random, because it's another one I have no idea what to put for it. Woodcutting, again, I have nothing there for. Fire making, mining, I have nothing there for those. So these are just broad ideas, broad topics about it. Kind of curious to see what you guys think should be done, and what you guys think about having skilling mixed in with combat, because we already have a heavy-handed combat into skilling. So how could we incorporate skilling into combat, making our skilling friends a lot more useful in combat than they used to be? Not to mention maybe make them more proficient in combat than we are ourselves. Unless you're somebody who trades all skills, and then you're absolutely beast. But that's one thing I'm trying to avoid too, is making people over the top beastly type things. So yeah, that's why I'm suggesting some sort of mixture. And I think the idea of adding abilities to it is actually a decent idea. The only downfall, again, is for legacy, there's certain things that would have to be an ability that wouldn't really be able to tie over to legacy. For instance, such as the thieving ability I had mentioned, the mug ability, which what that ability would do was you would have a roll at the drop table of whatever you're fighting. So let's say I'm fighting my current Slayer task is Abyssal Demons, so I use them for example. Let's say I go to attack them, I have the Alchemical Onyx, which is the luck of the dwarves. I have that, and I go to steal from them, and the ring shines brightly, and I get the Abyssal Wand from it, or I get maybe 20 coins. It's whatever would be on its drop table would be able, whatever you could steal. Eventually, there would have to be some limitations, like bosses, like the very unique drops, like from bosses, because. But yet again, I mean, if you're going to risk fighting a boss and then using an ability like that, maybe you should be able to steal whatever. And the only other thing would have to be, how would it be handled in PvP? Because certain items, of course, are not tradable. So you would have to find a way to make it so it's, hardcore account, just received 200 million invention. Wow. So there have to be some sort of good middle ground. And thinking about it, skills like invention, they don't really need... I'm sorry, I have a massive head cold, it seems like. But skills like invention, they already have a heavy impact on both skilling and combat, so they really wouldn't have to be tied into this. But I would like to see more things come out of invention down the road. And another one of those is, I'll actually talk about it now since we're on the topic of skilling and combat and skilling, is to have item fusion. And what item fusion is you take one item and you fuse it with another item. Now this could take components. It could take energy. It could take both. And of course, if it's augmentable gear, you could augment it. Now, one of the reasons why I actually came to play with this is because there's actually a lot of good items out there. You know, a lot of good effects out there. But they're at a low tier, so they're kind of weak and kind of pathetic. Pathetic. Because nobody's really going to be using them. And it's just like, well, let's try to bring some life back into these items. One of these items, you know, I think is actually pretty cool, especially if you are a person who enjoys summoning, and that is a spirit cape. Because the spirit cape can actually help you out a decent amount for summoning. And while you're in combat. I'll show you here quickly. I never personally bought it because by the time I could get it, I was soon going to be getting a cape that had better stats. I thought I said shop. Okay. Yeah, see, you know, my strength bonuses and armor is way higher than the spirit cape, which it does give a decent amount, 17 strength in each style, but see, it also gives a reduction of the cost of any scroll abilities that your combat familiars have. So it would reduce the cost on them, but at the same time, its stats aren't the greatest. So that's why I would suggest maybe, you know, you would take the effect of that item and do an item fusion to something, let's say the Reef Walker cape, which doesn't have an effect. So you take those two, you fuse them together, and you have the Spirit Walker cape. I think it's a cool concept, and you kind of, for a cosmetic appearance, you kind of take the two and you kind of mix them together. Now, this of course is a huge project, but I do believe it should be a limited project. I don't think everything should be able to be fused. That is one thing. Like, I do think there's things that should be fused, and then I think there's things that shouldn't be fused. For instance, okay, the Twisted Bird skull necklace, you know, maybe not. But anything that would be mid-level and upper would be, to me, the ideal range. So, for instance, like the Demon Horn necklace, maybe you could take that and fuse it with the, let's say the Blood Fury amulet. You could actually mix them together. Now, this, of course, would probably require some pretty hefty components to fuse them together, and a pretty hefty amount of energy, and probably high-level energy, probably incandescent energy, really. Because that would be a really big item to be able to get, because not only would you be healing the whole time, but you would also have the capability of having your prayer be restored to you, which would further feed into your soul split. So, I mean, stuff like that is the kind of stuff I'm talking about, you know, having those kind of item fusions. Weapons don't really have too much of that other than special effects, you know, special attacks. So that's like, well, for instance, the Dragon Hatchet has a special attack. I think it's called Clobber. So that's why I think that would actually be a good idea. For instance, like the Ring of Vigor. It's a really good ring, but why would you wear that if you could wear something like Luck of the Dwarves? Its effect is really good, but at the same time, I want my drops. So that's why I'm suggesting something like Item Fusion as well. And that would be through the invention category, because you'd be fusing items together, inventing a whole new item. Which is also how something like the Soul Eater sword can actually come into play, that they had advertised, you know, during the original pitch of invention. Which was an interesting weapon. It was very cool looking. But, you know, let me know what you guys think. Like, how do you think skilling should be involved with combat, other than the ways it is already, which is honestly not that big of a deal, because you have food, yeah, it contributes, but you have potions, but that's about it. Because everything else you kind of can get from drops or everything else, and you don't want to have no drops from the skilling categories to make them completely overpowered, because then combat is really, really bad. But yet again, if people are just buying from everybody else, I mean, what's the big deal? I mean, a lot of people do that now, so I don't think it would really change much unless you add more benefits to skilling. Give people a little bit more benefits. I know a lot of people would say, well, better money-making methods would be needed to be in place, but if you really think about it, let's say they throw 5 new money-making methods into effect. For instance, a skill like fishing. Well, eventually, people are going to find whichever one heals the most, and that one's going to be the one that gets used the most. So why use the other weaker methods when you can just get the one that heals the most? Or next most, because you don't want to quite go so high and take so long to fish it. You see what I mean? It's one of those things where you got to find new methods. That's what RuneScape is kind of lacking. They need some new methods in for their skilling. But anyway, that's my video for today. That's my suggestion, is not only item fusion, but also skilling abilities and bringing skilling into combat itself. So thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, later guys.